Hello everyone, welcome to the very first edition of the Creative Question Challenge. My name is Kazune Iwasa, a strategist from Hakuhodo, Tokyo. I will be the catalyst for this session. The Creative Question Challenge, CQC, is a new brainstorming session in which speakers explore and present their creative questions in a 30-minute dialogue. Our visualizer will map the keywords and the questions to help us create a compass that leads us to the creative question in the end. You, the viewers, are also welcome to join us by posting your questions and comments in the live chat so that we can create the vision together as a global society. Today, we have two very special panelists, Ms. Alexandra Daisy Ginsberg and Simon Weckert. Daisy, Simon, glad to have you today. And our visualizer is Kirsten Blatter-Binder from Electronica. Yes, and you can find more information in the description page on the Electronica website. So let's start the show. Today's theme is ecology and technology. Ecology and technology. Yes, I'd like to kick off the session with a question. Should we try to harmonize with nature? Or maybe we can say, should we try to follow the nature? Who wants to start?
Simon, I can go first. I already have questions about the question and this, the words that we're using around harmony and nature would be the starting point for me. What is harmony with nature, and is it even possible? I think it's, it's to imagine that humans can be harmonious with nature is to exclude ourselves from nature itself. So we're trying to be harmonious with our own environment is the first thing to deal with. And then the next thing is to ask, is nature itself harmonious? And we can imagine a cybernetic system, sort of as once proposed by the Gaia theory of the Earth, sort of in this self-regulating feedback loop. But that's not really how nature operates. Biological systems are sort of improving and surviving, but there isn't an intentionality. So I think some of these words are quite human-centric, especially around harmony and sort of imposing human values. And then the question of nature itself, what is that? Is that all of biology, all of geology, everything that exists is nature, but we're certainly part of that equation. So
exactly.
The first problem to deal with.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, should we try? I guess then basically it's also when we say should we try, then you could also reformulate it in a way. Should we try to harmonize with ourselves, right? Because I guess, as we said, like we are part of this ecosystem, of this nature, basically, right? But yeah, I mean, same thing for me. It's like, what is this in that sense? What is nature? How you describe it? What do you basically also exclude by that word, right? I mean, when you say, I guess most people, when they describe nature, I guess they're kind of thinking about, I don't know, let's say forests, these kind of systems, animal world, whatever. But I guess let's say that when we talk, I would say for me, nature is in that sense also quite human, right? And therefore you could also argue, like when this is basically a human thing, you could also say then technology is basically also part of our nature, right? So yeah, I guess to harmonize with these aspects or with this kind of subjects, question that's basically kind of pros and cons thing, right? Like how can you harmonize? For example, with technology, when the technology is actually created by us, basically.
I would suggest that. So this particular word harmony and our relation to it is something that the UN created a resolution in 2009. So the resolution that we should live in harmony with nature, and that, maybe that's a better way to approach it, is to say, well, how are we living in our natural environment, which includes technology, which includes us, which includes our society, which includes all the other organisms and resources and things that we should and shouldn't touch, and how do we think about living in a way that invokes less damage on that, and then what kinds of relationships do we then build with the things that we make and the things that we protect and preserve? But I think that the nature itself, it makes me think of I think it's from the Tennyson poem, Nature, Red in Tooth and Claw. We have this idea of wild animals ripping each other to pieces, but you don't have to look much further than 2020 and the coronavirus to see that we're not living in a harmonious state with the natural world. Viruses are out there to spread, and our systems are all quite fragile. These relationships are not loving, fair, harmonious, melodious relationships in any way. We're all out for survival, every species.
Yeah, and so to say the same thing is for technology, right? I mean, when it comes to data protection, to surveillance systems and so on, and you could also then say like, okay, yeah, these systems are basically also not really, let's say, harmonic in a way, right? And they are also actually used, I would say, also against us, against the nature, basically. And of course, I mean, talking about, I don't know, mining and how we're gonna create a hardware for some specific technology proposals, then definitely you could say like that's not a harmonic, that's not a basically fair harmonic way, and what basically, as I understand, how harmonic should in that sense work.
I think the question then is, well, why are we asking this question? Should we try to harmonize with nature? If we're including technology in nature as well, what is the goal? Is the goal to create fairer systems for humans, fairer systems, imposing human ideas of what's fair on our natural environment, or is it about creating a more sustainable society or societies or ways of living so that the world that we currently enjoy is there for future generations and future generations of other species?
Yeah.
What are we trying to solve?
Well, yeah, what we are trying to solve, right? I mean, that's basically one of the big, always like, this is how technology, one of the big critics, right, about technology is that always this kind of terms like we have to solve something or we have to solve problems with it. But, that's kind of deeper questions is like really like what it means actually if you're going to use this technology and what it means to our environment. These kind of questions are somehow also falling under the table quite often, and yeah, the harmony therefore is not there.
Or maybe we could say we are already harmonious with nature because we're living in a natural way by destroying and prioritizing our own survival, and the technologies we create as sort of part of that process. So that's what we're doing is entirely natural anyway.
Yeah. But for me, the question is, in this sense, is also like, how is this nature also developing by our influence or with the influence of technology, for example? So basically, how is all this, how all these kind of ecosystems are also, let's say, changing over time, and how we're gonna also, let's say, change, let's say, the nature in that sense, like forests and the animal world and so on. So how is basically this world somehow also related in their behavior to the way we're gonna create technology? And is there also some kind of effect which you can see that basically it also works in another way around? So basically right now we are much more arguing from our perspective, right, to this kind of nature point. But is there also, let's say, another point of view that the basic nature is somehow trying to harmonize with us, right? And how is that actually influencing, for example, our technology developments or the things we're gonna, let's say, trying to, let's say, solve basically, like as an agent?
What would that look like to have a nature that's trying to harmonize with the technologies that we create?
Yeah, I mean, it would be super interesting, right, to say like, okay, this kind of solving question doesn't come from a human perspective. It pretty much more comes from, let's say, I mean, if there's a way to figure that out, let's say from the natural perspective, from this kind of little identities, which we are actually not giving so much attention to it, right? And basically to have like a twist in it, to say like, okay, technology is much more driven by nature and not by basically us, as we are, let's say, excluding us from the term of nature.
So do you think?
Hi, Kazune.
Okay then. Do you think are the nature and technology interdependent or not?
So you say that again, please?
Are the nature and technology interdependent or not?
Nature and technology, if they are independent.
Interdependent. So they.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think that, I mean, technologies are created out of natural resources, so you can't have the technologies without silicon and lithium. And
mining and so on. Yeah.
You can't have a hammer without a tree to provide the wood for the handle, or the basics and materiality of technology. Technology is not invisible, and it requires energy. So I think they're entirely interdependent. I think there's ways that there's sort of mimicry in technologies that are more akin to nature, or that use sort of natural systems. Farming of forests, for example, is or crops, or these are all technologies. The development of different kinds of agricultural species is a form of technology. I would say yes.
Yeah, for sure. I guess they are like super close connected. But yeah, again, I think in that sense you always have. For me, I would say that we always have to try to follow this kind of, let's say, terms that like technology should always stand behind ecology or nature, basically. And yeah, right now we don't have the feeling, right? I mean, as you said, like if you think about mining silicon and so on, it seems to be the technology needs the nature and to exist, or basically to, I don't know, create something, which is obviously not from a environmental point of view not a good thing, right? In that sense, we are kind of destroying our environment by developing technologies. And it should definitely come to a point where this actually, it is a question actually, I mean, is it possible to not destroy the environment where we're living in by technology? I guess it's quite hard to do that, right?
I mean, that's part of what's been interesting in exploring biotechnologies, which I've spent some time looking at synthetic biology, for example, over the last 10 or 12 years. And part of the argument for those kinds of technologies is, well, they're using the same materials that the natural world is made from, but at the same time you need energy inputs. You still need to cut down sugarcane to feed to the yeast or bacteria that are engineered to produce those molecules. And so I think that's such a fascinating question, is can you have technology without you need resource to create technology. So even if you're farming and create a sustainable way to farm that puts nutrients back into the soil, you're always still borrowing something to put back. That's another point. Always a balance account.
Well, yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, that's, I mean, definitely. I mean, on the other side, you can also argue, okay, of course, right? I mean, for example, when it comes to, I don't know, energy usage, right? Then a lot of people saying like, okay, actually, I don't have this kind of feeling that we're running into some energy issues because of, I don't know, solar energy and all this kind of stuff. But still, I guess, right, it needs some kind of materials to produce solar panels, and still it needs whatever metal and so on to somehow create renewable energy sources. So probably even this argument to say like, okay, we have in I don't know, maybe near or quite far future, we have this kind of resources. It's still basically like always there that you need the natural resources to produce that. Yeah.
Okay. And we're in the middle, and considering the discussion so far, and I want to ask one more question. What is the ecologically fair technology? So Daisy mentioned that technology can influence the nature in a good way. And what will be the criteria from the next stage?
For fair technology?
Yeah, ecologically fair technology.
I mean, for sure, you know, I mean, one project that popped up in my mind right now is that, you know, this kind of projects like fair phones, for example. I mean, the idea of to reuse technology, to reuse hardware, for example, right? And also, unfortunately, I don't know the English word. In German, it's obsolescence, or obsolescence, I guess the same in English, something, right? Like, basically that things are made for just a short period of time on purpose to somehow, let's say from a capitalistic point of view, to, you know, basically grow and to buy new products and so on. I think these kind of stuff definitely as a society we have to, let's say, work on, and basically I guess we have to stop that these kinds of effects doesn't happen in the future, so that products are actually made for a longer living period of time, and also that you as a, let's say, user of this technology are always able, for example, to repair it, right? And that there's basically the option for you to repair it and to replace some, for example, in the smartphone, I don't know, when you have a broken display or whatever, then you can easily repair that, replace the whatever. That you don't have to get, for example, a new smartphone for that, right? Because we know some systems are actually made for that. Once you open it, they're actually broken. So, and I think this is actually what, when I think about how technology could be more fairer with regards to nature.
Can a technology be fair? Because fairness implies a lack of self-interest, that everyone involved is equally benefits equally. And then we say, well, what are the parties to that fairness? We're just talking about human fairness. So you can have a more ethical phone that's less exploitative in the materials that it uses and the ways of that it's created, but it is still always taking from the balance account of the earth. It's with extracting materials, and so I wonder if it is even possible to, if we think about some of the resolutions that some countries have passed, for example, Costa Rica, sort of giving agency to nature in legal form. How would you create a fair technology in that context? How would you benefit all parties, including the natural world? So yeah, I don't know the answer, but I'm curious how to even imagine something that doesn't exploit people or other species or future generations. Like, again, then who do you expand that definition of fairness out to create something? And in doing so, would it become impossible to create anything? And then meaning that maybe it's not the right question.
But isn't it also like, let's say, also basically, I think for me, questioning ourselves super strongly, like say how we exist, how we live. I mean, there's one question for me is like, let's say if there is, for example, no technology, or let's say a technology that is fair with regards to nature, can we actually live in that world then as human beings? I mean, of course, you could go back like, like, I don't know, 10 years back in history, when you could say probably this time was quite fair with regards to nature. I mean, of course, in that sense, we also there, right, use technologies. We use tools to cut leaves, whatever, to prepare food and so on. But I mean, if you take this kind of term quite radical, you could also say then, yeah, actually, still, right, we are living in that nature, and we are somehow damaging it by, let's say, moving in it, in whatever we do. Actually, I have the feeling.
Stop doing anything, because everything we do is problematic as a species, but maybe that is actually something that you have to come to accept, and then you can start to create different definitions and terminology about being more precise. So what is it, who is it fair to, or who is it ethical for? What are the values that are going into a technology, and how do we create a broader set of ways to describe what is exploitative? So there's a lot of work, and I know that your work is about sort of the data and the exploitative sort of practices of certain technologies and how to counter that. But how can is there a broader set when we also start to take into account the materials and the impact on the environment and future generations, and then it becomes very special to make a thing.
Yeah.
Actually, it's an indication of slowness that's perhaps counter to some of the other methods, but it balances with the violence that the system that we currently live in. as animals.
I mean, for me, for example, when it comes to data, it comes quite often down to the question, like, do we need this data, right? I mean, we have our smartphones, and then basically we are tracked. We're sending so much data in that second to somewhere into a cloud, which uses energy to basically work with that. And you know, for me, it's more like this kind of micro decision to say, like, okay, really, do we need this kind of data package? And I mean, of course, it's actually like 1 bit, right? But when you multiply it by, I don't know, 500 million, then actually in the end, it makes a lot of energy consumption, right? And especially like in this kind of technology world where we are living, I think these kind of questions needs to be addressed, especially against bigger companies, which are really basically, they are hungry for this kind of data, right? And I guess that's for me, let's say, might be one method or some kind of way to probably also to start with when it comes to data, really questioning, do we need all of this kind of stuff, and can we work with less?
And maybe there are interesting analogies with other biological species in there, so the kinds of data that trees or other plant species are collecting about their environment, and it's probably not a lot of extraneous data for their survival. But within our complex technological ecosystem, there's a lot of different agents who are requiring that data for their survival. For example, the corporations who are collecting this data. So we need to be more slimline, like trees.
Yeah, but isn't there also a, let's say, ironic thing in it? Like, wait, when you're trying to analyze nature, you need technology for doing this, to measure it, and therefore actually there's some kind of, I don't know, loophole somehow.
Yeah, so I've been doing lots of research into bees recently and learning about how scientists work with bees, and learning about how scientists are gluing tiny little antennae onto the backs of bumblebees so they can track how they go on their foraging flights. And then you realize that someone's job is actually to glue antennae on the backs of bees. And then as soon as the bee goes over the hill, there's no signal, and the bee is
gone.
Come back at the end of the day, and then you realize how poor our systems are that we've created compared to the kind of immense computational power that's going on inside a bee's brain, and its colonies. Yeah, we're sort of listening with it's like a big hearing cone to listen to these very sophisticated systems, it feels like.
Yeah, I'm always kind of surprised, like when scientists found, let's say, this kind of structures in nature, or for example, swarm behavior, right? And then basically they come up with, let's say, methods which is pretty much more using natural, let's say, structures and systems instead of, using some kind of super sophisticated technology measuring instruments, right? Like this kind of simple idea suddenly, which is basically like where the nature is actually telling you, look, actually here, right, this is actually also another way how you, I mean, probably we need that, like how you can measure me when the nature is basically telling or talking to humans. And probably it needs more like this, actually, more like listening to this and natural ecosystems instead of trying to use our machines, devices, whatever, to measure the nature.
Well, the natural systems, or the existing biological systems, to be more precise, have been through hundreds of millions of years or billions of years of iteration. So they've been kind of vast computational space that we try and replicate in our models.
Yeah.
And actually, we're now down to the final 4 minutes or so. So let us see the map together. And some of the interesting points in the discussion includes, firstly, we have the premise that nature, we are part of nature. Also, technology is part of nature as well. And technology influences nature, and nature influences technology. So they are interdependent existence. And how can we develop their technology to the ecology? And also we have to see the next generation. And we'd like to cut off the limits of the time and the space as well. And lastly, we were talking about the need of technology to work with nature, and maybe we have to develop a new ecosystem mimicking biological and not depending so much on the data. And what can be the keyword to start thinking or creative questions?
The keyword.
Yeah, keywords, or maybe we can put it into questions directly.
I think why would be my first one. So, why do we do what we do? Why are we creating these technologies? You know, so for me, why is kind of essential, and that points to defining values and defining a system to evaluate. You know, that's connected to values about, you know, the things that we create. We're trying to create fairer, so more ecologically fair technologies, if that's one of the outcomes. For me, that question comes out of why harmonize with nature. We go right back to the beginning. So yeah, my keyword, why.
How about you, Simon?
Well, I mean, let's say one answer to that for me would be measurable. And so I think that's but much more measurable, let's say the measured world as a critique, basically, more like that. So why we are using technology, for me, it's like that we're trying to measure the nature, we're trying to measure the world to make it understandable in a way for us. And so probably that would be somehow my keyword, that we somehow have to, maybe I would say, overcome this in a way, yeah, because this is also for me like one driver for technology, and then therefore basically this kind of why question, or these kind of questions related to how we're going to create technology, and if they are, let's say, friendly, economically friendly and nature friendly, are basically much more coming later. And the first intention is more like, okay, we have to somehow measure it.
Thank you. So the creating questions are, why are we creating this technology? And also, how can we measure the world, and why we are trying to measure that world? Yeah, I think there are so many things to talk more, but thank you, the time has come. So thank you, Daisy and Zimon, and everyone in the audience for joining first edition of see you again in our next creative question challenge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.